Hey guys, let me know if you can hear me. I know I was having issues with the stream, but let me know if you can hear me. Pop out. I don't know, there was some ingestion error I was getting, so my bad. Good deal. All right. Sorry, I'm like 3 minutes late. um, just giving it a second here. I know a few people were joining in late as well. Just so you guys know, I have people here from my Facebook page. I've also got people here from the tropical weather subreddit that I'm a moderator on. So welcome both of you guys. Indigestion, you got me there. That was good. But we'll get starting here in a second. Just letting people filter in. I guess while we get started, let's talk a little bit about Irma right now. We've talked about in the past, as far as, I like to roll up to where we are now with the system and where it's going to be in the future, right? So let's do that real quick. So you can see Irma here, currently a Category 4, making its way now due west, as you could see right on the forecast track. And you got to give National Hurricane Center a round of applause for tracking this. I mean, systems like this don't really make a west-southwest movement as this is doing. And I mean, outside of the way that Irma is kind of stepping west-southwest versus a gradual movement, they've been on the money with their projection. And you can see the eye is literally passing right over their plot points. And it's actually a little bit ahead of pace. So that's definitely something that we need to keep an eye on, which means the system might be here earlier versus later, but not much of a difference versus what's forecasted. So this is where it's at. And you can see it's going to continue to be a Category 4 as it eventually starts to make a west-northwest motion, which will then bring it closer to the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, etc. I think it will definitely pass north of those areas. I don't see it going any further than that. Hold on one second. Okay, we're good there. I heard a lot of people asking for me in the chat there. So, all right. So that's where we are right now. Keep an eye on. Yeah, exactly. Little humor there. We'll move this one down here. We're not ready for that yet. So here's the National Hurricane Center's official track, and I really think we need to keep our eyes on what is within that cone. And yes, now South Florida is included in that cone, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But as you can see, by 2 a.m. Wednesday, it's bearing down on the British Virgin Islands. So anyone that would happen to be watching this, or anyone that you know of that's in that area, the time to leave is now if you can. I'm sure, flights or whatnot would be difficult to change, but definitely try your best. By 2 p.m. on Wednesday, Puerto Rico, the very northeastern end is probably going to get a direct hit. Anywhere from Category 4-ish winds, might even be a 5 if it continues to strengthen as it is at its current pace. So that's something to look at. And then it'll make its way north of the Dominican Republic, which is significant because you can see the cone is a little bit within the DR and near Haiti. If it makes land interaction with there, first off, it's going to be terrifying to people that are there, but also it could also weaken this. And for the United States, that would be great news. Anything that can slow this thing down before it hits the Bahamas will be most appreciated. And the other thing too is I've heard a lot of people talk about Cuba. Oh, Cuba is going to cause interaction with Irma, and first off, it could just plow into Cuba. That's one of the things that is a possibility. I don't think that's likely, and I'll get into why I don't think it's likely. But most of the mountains are on the southern end of Cuba here in this region, and then parts even offshore. The higher elevations aren't at the northern part of the island. I bring that up because if Irma decides to pass just off its shores, the eye wall, it's really not going to weaken very much. So that's something that you need to consider as it moves through the Bahamas. And I will tell you, once it gets north of Dominican Republic and then makes its way right through the Bahamas, this is when this thing is going to really kick into high gear and grow even more than it is now. Because if I go back and you look at this, I mean, it looks terrifying, but it's really truly not a large hurricane right now. That's because the northern end is being squashed by the high ridge known as the Azores High. That is really pressing down on Irma right now, not allowing that outflow to really ventilate, and thus it can't grow in size as quickly as it wants to. But once it makes its way here over Bermuda, and it doesn't have to deal with that Azores High anymore, it's really going to rapidly increase in size and intensity, and that is when things really start to get real with the system. So I'm going to move this one down. We'll get into that in a second. Okay. So let's talk about the Euro, and let's talk about the GFS and what the runs are saying. These are the most recent runs from both models, and I'm bringing up this to show that both are kind of saying the same thing as far as landfall right now. And if you haven't seen it, that is as of next Sunday, September 10th, showing near Miami landfall. This is the European, by the way, and it shows just off the coast, and basically a glancing blow to Miami. Basically, it would be like an eye wall that would definitely go over the Miami Fort Lauderdale area. But you can see here it continues then to move at a north-northeast fashion, and then you can see here, you see that blue, that's a upper level low that is starting to interact in the deep south with the system, and it kind of pulls it back on shore and then landfalls there in Charleston. But the thing to notice, and the big difference between the GFS and the European, is the European, you see this trough as it moves out. The European is saying, hey, there's going to be a little interaction here, and that interaction is going to cause this pull. You can see that north-northeast. That's an important thing, because if you go back to the GFS, look, no interaction at all. It then rides right up the spine of Florida. Generally speaking, they're similar solutions. The European, again, has that action. Okay. So that was bad. All right. I won't use the arrow keys again. So real quick, just in case you guys missed it, here's what we're showing. This is the GFS. Let's go back to the European. This is what I was saying. I was toggling on and off there, so I apologize. Yep, it's definitely hotkeyed, so my bad. Okay, so here's the European. It's showing that trough interaction. The GFS is not showing the trough interaction. Okay. With the European showing that interaction, it's then going to pull it north-northeast, right? Ever so slightly off the shore of Florida, basically saving most of central Florida. GFS does not think that's going to happen. The GFS says, hey, no trough interaction, and we're going to run right up the spine of Florida. And if you look at some of the pressures, we'll look a little bit closer here. Let's see, go to upper, here we go. Landing, now do not take the GFS verbatim as far as pressures are concerned. 894 at landfall, more than likely, take 10% off that. It's roughly a 910 to a 915-ish on landfall, which is easily a category 5. Okay. Still a very intense storm, but it's not in the 800s, thank God. But that would be a direct landfall and then ride right up the spine of Florida. If that were to happen, I mean, right up 95, every single city along that way would experience category 3 to category 4 winds, and then it would continue to make its way north. Not a situation that any Floridian or anybody north of that even would want to experience. So right now, we've really got to kind of pull for the European, because if it does manage to go just interact with the trough just a little bit and then move north-northeast off the shore, yes, will Charleston to Savannah to even North Carolina get it? Yes. But if this rode the spine up Florida, this would potentially be, one of the worst, if not the worst, landfall in U.S. history. And that includes Harvey that just happened with all the flooding too. Not a flooding event, but just the sheer amount of people that live in this area most affected. It would not be a good time for people. So let's look a little bit closer at what some of these pressures look like. And I want you to understand, take a little bit off of what's shown here. Again, this would be closer to like a 905 to a 910. Winds right here, and if I zoom out a little bit, these are in knots. So max wind right here is 157 knots. Forgive my math here, but I know that's over 200 miles an hour in terms of what winds would be experienced at the surface at landfall. Is that going to happen? No. I think it's going to be closer to that 170 range, 175 range, which is where the European is showing. Still a rather devastating landfall scenario coming for Miami per the GFS. And then it moves on shore. And like I said, it continues to then move up the entire I-95 sector. So, and then again, it moves into Georgia. And this is the GFS. I don't have images like this for the European, mainly because I don't have a subscription that allows me to get these just yet. I am thinking about doing that, but it's not much different, and it's just offshore a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's talk about the size of the system. So this is a simulated infrared. I've heard some people mention Hurricane Andrew. I've heard some people mention other systems. Irma, if it continues to grow and really proliferate like we were talking about in the Bahamas, it's going to be massive in size. It will be one of the largest hurricanes that have developed in the Atlantic. And almost to the degree of how some of these systems develop in the Pacific. It's just going over areas that have very low shear, and in the Bahamas in particular, the waters are just off the charts warm. I think I might even have an image to show you how warm they are. They're extremely warm, but also as it makes its way over the Bahamas, we'll go back to this image here real quick. There are going to be air patterns as it makes its way in the Bahamas that move out in northerly, northeastern, eastern, southern directions. Literally, it's like the actual system as it makes its way to the Bahamas will be fully ventilated. Any of the outflow from the system, outflow, by the way, is here. You can see these bands that come off. That's the outflow of the system. If the system can't get outflow off of it, it chokes the ability for it to grow. That won't be the case at all once this hits the Bahamas. The outflow on this is going to look crazy on not only radar, but also on satellite. You'll be able to see that really well. So when it gets to the Bahamas, it will grow exponentially, and it will begin to bomb out, as they say. Pressure's dropping very quickly. And WC current, I'm glad you brought up. There is no such thing as a Category 6. I've seen that mentioned in some hype posts and whatnot, and even the media a few times has mentioned that. The scale goes to 5. Anything above a 5 is just that. It's just above a 5. I've heard the term hypercane or whatever. I don't think any of those are official. But yeah, maybe we need to adjust the scale. How about that? Okay, let's talk about the ensemble members. Okay, let's talk about that for a second, because it tells a bigger story than the operational runs. Oftentimes you hear me say with the operational run, it goes from left to right, north to south, east to west, windshield wipers back and forth. If we look at the GFS ensembles, let me go to, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so this is this morning's run at 6 a.m. And you can see, again, Florida is still very much in the crosshairs. And then the next run, notice a little bit of a shift east, right? I mean, it's still mainly over Florida, but a lot of members came east a little bit. And then the most recent run, which was this evening, came right back. And this is a troublesome run. And I'll tell you exactly why. The GFS really wants to bring this west. You can see from the last run here where it's like right over Central Florida, it wants to bring more of the members in that more highlighted area to the west coast of Florida. Now, the west coast of Florida has some very vulnerable cities, in particular Tampa. There have been many articles, and I mean, I've even read some scientific journals on the imminent threat that Tampa has for flooding, just from regular rain events. If this were to pass over Tampa, I mean, the images would be just like Houston, but a lot of their critical infrastructure is in floodplains and Tampa, and it would not be a good scenario for anyone on the West Coast. But one other reason it would not be good if it did decide to trend west as it's showing is if Irma decides to go into the Gulf of Mexico. Not only is the shear low, but the temperature of waters are almost exactly like they are in the Bahamas, if not warmer and deeper. That means it gives more fuel for Irma to continue to go through eye wall replacement cycles, and grow even larger and even stronger. So it's like a catch-22 right now. That's the way I see it. This either, bites the bullet to the east of Florida, or it rides the spine, or it goes to the west of Florida. I really don't think at this point Florida is not going to see something from this. Now, if the trends continue west, then we'll start talking about the Gulf. But at this point, I think Florida is going to be affected by this. And the insane thing is, it's 6 days away, and we still don't have a clearer picture as to, like, where that will be. I personally think that the models are really starting to hone in on where this is going to be, especially the ensembles. And there's one more here I'll show you. This is the EPS, which is based off the European, right? So this was from, that's not it. Hold on just a second here. I guess they, okay. So this was from the run earlier today. I don't have the previous run. They must have taken it off. But you can see right here that it too has Florida in that zone, but it also has the Carolinas. And the reason for that is this right here. Let's go back to this trough interaction scenario. You can see the European wants to interact with that trough and pull it north-northeast, or the GFS, as we were showing before, it doesn't want any of that. So that's significant because the EPS, which I just freaking closed out. Hold on a second here. I had it saved. Now that was from an earlier run. But you guys saw the European wants to bring this north-northeast. Now that's as of around 2 p.m. today. 2 a.m. we'll get another run of it. I think it might tick ever so slightly west because that trough that it's seeing right here is actually a little faster in real observations right now than it has been modeled. So I think that means the GFS might be onto something with that, but we'll see. We'll see. So that is what we have for there. This is one of the other images I wanted to show. And this is something that will be talked about a little bit more. Surge is going to be the big story here with Irma. Obviously, Miami with king tides, they see all the time. There's flooding. 3 inches of rain. There's flooding. Surge is a really big concern with this system. It's going to upwell waves of as high as 60 feet when it makes its way through the Bahamas. And then as it approaches either the southern tip of Florida or west or east, we're not sure, surge is going to be just insane. I mean, let's go back real quick here. And if you look at, where was it? This image. I mean, it just shows you it has a lot of surface area and it's going to bring up water with it. Whereas smaller hurricanes like Andrew, which is really, it was just a glorified tornado when it came in and hit Miami, didn't have a lot of surge associated with it, but it had very powerful winds. Irma will have nearly as powerful winds as Andrew, but will also bring with it an insane amount of surge. And that's something that is significant because if you look at the data right now as it is, this data is representative of population centers in the U.S. that are in the harm's way of surge should something, should like a hurricane occur. I mean, at a Category 5 level, which is what this is forecasted at right now before it hits the Miami area, Florida has just about 7.9 million people that could be affected by surge. And as you see, outside of New York, it doesn't even come close to how many people can be affected. Now, consider this, too, when you look at this graph and you look at Florida itself. I mean, Florida on the West Coast has, again, and on the Panhandle has a large population, but it's mostly concentrated along the East Coast. So again, the scenario occurs like the GFS where it wants to come right up the spine of Florida. That is a situation that nobody wants to see. Right up I-95 where most of the population centers are, it would be a catastrophe. So here's what we're hoping for, on the hope that we're clinging to right now. What we're hoping for is that this continues to just push west. And then maybe somehow interacts with the low that is developing on the other side of this ridge over here, and then maybe makes its way into an unpopulated area way out west. Unfortunately, none of the members are showing that. That's a stretch at this point, and I don't think it's something that will actually happen. But that's the biggest hope that we have as far as Irma is concerned. right now, if someone were to put a gun to my head and say, hey, where do you think this is going to land next Sunday as modeled? I think right now it's a safe bet to say that Florida will be affected. I think the way that models are trending, I think it might actually be a little on the western side of Florida. Not to say Miami won't be affected. I think it will be more on the western end of Florida. But I think the European is correct that it will get that interaction. And it will then again head north-northeast. So I think this solution, maybe a little bit further west and then recurring back out this way, is what I think may happen. And that's the way things are trending. But again, there could be some upper level changes that are not yet foreseen by models and real-time observations that could change this and move it towards the Panhandle or move it towards, New Orleans or even further west. Who knows at this point? The one thing I don't think will happen, and I think the GFS and the European are saying the same thing, is I don't think an out to sea scenario exists anymore. I think a landfall is what's going to happen. So, in summary, I know it's a lot of information. I know there's a lot of maybes. I think it will interact with the trough somewhat to steer it. I think it will make its way in the western Florida end, then make its way across Florida, and then make its way north-northeast, maybe even back over water near Sedona. So that's where we are with that. I know may or not be a lot of questions. I know there's one other image I wanted to show in terms of like intensity, but I forgot it. This is worth noting here. And yeah, let me show you guys this real quick. This is worth noting. So this is on the intensity scale. Every single tropical model that exists has this, and these lines here represent categories: tropical storm, category 1, category 2, category 3, etc. Every single one of these has this getting to a category 3 level outside of 2. Many, a couple getting to 5, almost all the rest getting to 4. I've never seen that on a tropical system in the Atlantic before. Usually there's a wide spread, and they're not nearly as clustered. Some are down here, Cat 1, 2, 3, maybe one crazy one that goes to 5 or 4. This type of clustering in terms of intensity, I've never seen before. And I think between how far out these models started showing this, between the intensities that are being shown on the GFS, all of the GFS is wrong on what the final landfall measure is in terms of intensity. It's not going to be a 894. That just shows you how strong the signal is as far as how much intensity we will see on landfall. So while the European is stepping back off that and showing more of a 915 to a 920, it is the message is clear to me. This will be in a major hurricane, high category 4, low 5 when it hits, with potential of being a major category 5 where it's beyond that scale if the conditions remain the same. I think it is going to surprise a lot of people just how big this thing will be. And I showed you guys that one image, the infrared. If I go back here to my images, there was one image that I saw that really kind of put it into perspective just how large it could be. Yeah, here we go. So this is European simulated radar, and this just to give you an idea of the size of this thing. Banding from southern Florida, really the width of the storm would be the length of southern Florida to North Carolina. Just an enormous system, and it continues to trend that way in terms of size. So I'm going to open up for questions. I don't know if you guys have any. There's a lot of uncertainty still, but the threat has risen tremendously. Yes, I get into memes as well. But no, the intensity, the size, the amount of surface area that it'll affect. These are all things that I think are knowns right now. And southern Florida is definitely under the gun to an extent. But this could very easily make its way into the Gulf the way that I'm seeing it as well. So let me know if you guys got any questions. Let's see here. By the way, this image was right when Harvey was just making its way on shore to Texas. The Europeans showed this. So. So here's the thing with evacuation, guys. We still have a lot of time to determine that. Points northern Florida, like Orlando, and even north of that, or even some parts south of that, like Fort Lauderdale, there's time. There's definitely time. But the next person asking, what would the responsible thing be for leadership given the forecast for evacuation? That is an extremely tough call. And you saw the variables, right? There's a lot. There's a lot that could steer this. And a lot that could steer it last minute, too. So there really is no easy answer here. But if things pan out as is and Thursday comes around, I mean, I definitely think they reverse the flow on highways and they try to get people out. I think that is... I think it's a real possibility. And anyone living in Florida right now, hey, go make sure you get water. Make sure you have an evacuation plan. You know where that route is. Just keep your eye on the news. I know our subreddit is way on top of this, sometimes overly on top of this, but there's tons of media for you to follow. I would recommend just about AccuWeather and the Weather Channel or whoever. Just keep your eye on it the rest of this week. Oh man, guys, don't ask me about the structural integrity of buildings. That's way outside my league. Yes, there was a video from Harvey that had a 3-story hotel and the walls ripped off. The stairwell walls, to be in particular. It was a chaser who got that video. But I have no idea of the structural integrity of an apartment. No idea. I will say this, if your windows are facing to the east or to the north, yeah, the way the winds would be coming in to the east and to the north, those would get pounded. So if you have westerly facing windows, that's better than nothing. Yeah, we won't. We're not going to talk about subreddit stuff in this, but thank you for the laughs there. Okay, yeah, real quick. I had people ask me about vacations in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, etc. Okay, so I just remember this. I've gotten a ton of messages on this, and I appreciate you guys reaching out, but listen, there's a lot of uncertainty here with this, and I'll pull up this again really quick just to reiterate. The best model in the world, aka the Euro, has a lot of spread, and this did come a little bit west, okay, but you can still see the Carolinas are involved, and Florida is involved much more now than it exhibits here. There's a lot of spread, so this is going to be really difficult for people to make decisions this week. I do not envy the local officials from any of these states and some of the things they'll have to do that will probably make a lot of people angry. But it's definitely going to spawn off tornadoes. Harvey was a record because it stalled for as long as it did. So that saw 210 tornado warnings. I would say anywhere in the range of 35 to even 75 tornado warnings from the system. It's that large. Banding will extend way inland too. So if you're in Orlando and it lands in Miami, tornadoes could spawn that far north. In terms of size, what do you compare to hurricanes in the past? Floyd. So that's a good one. Let me pull this up. See if there's an image of Floyd. So this is actually, and I don't know if this is a good image or not. It's a terrible image. Hurricane Floyd, I don't know if you can really see in terms of size. Here we go. That's a good one. Hurricane Floyd is a good representation. I think Irma has the ability to be larger. Just simply going off of how much the Bahamas how fertile the Bahamas are for hurricane activity right now. So Floyd, I think, is a good representation of how large this can be. And I think it will be larger than Floyd. So, and if you want to talk about size again real quick, go back to that one image on the first page. There we go. This is a good representation of the size. So winds can be felt as far as southern Cuba while it makes landfall in Miami. So hope that explains it. I'm gonna look at the other chat here and see if there's any questions. Nope. All right, guys. Look, I appreciate you taking the time coming on here. Last thing for anybody in Florida or anybody, and that includes all the way up to Orlando. I would say the next 3 days are going to be pretty critical. If come Thursday everything looks the same, you should expect to leave the state. I don't think they'd mess around with those evacuations. They didn't with Matthew, and I mean, this thing is like, the accumulated energy of this is like 3 Matthews. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. If you have any questions, hit me up on my Facebook page or on the subreddit. And let's hope things pan for the better. And this thing hits in an unpopulated area way west in the mountains of Mexico. But as things are right now, it appears that Florida is definitely under the gun. Thank you guys very much, and have a good one.